I am here with Amy Fox, and we are talking about podcasting and about leaving corporate to start our own businesses. She was with Lyft for about a decade and then also with Wealthfront and decided to exit and go start her own podcast show. So she has partnered with Chris Hutchins. The name of the show is called All the Hacks. And what I loved, Amy, we were talking about this before we hit record, but it's a freaking cool podcast. Do not leave this podcast yet, but I'm going to tell you what All the Hacks is all about. When you get to their website, it says, upgrade your life, money, and travel. Yes, that sounds great. And then their subheading is learn all the hacks to upgrade your life, money, and travel, all while spending less and saving more. Right? And it's all about happiness at the lowest cost. What a great message. I love that. So yeah, so you were telling me, Amy, that you and Chris worked at Wealthfront together, and then somehow you decide, you know what? Let's go start a podcast. How did that come about?
So it's a very interesting story, and it's not something I think either one of us intended to do initially. Um, First things first, Chris is my husband, and so that's one thing that we've always been thinking about the best ways to optimize our lives together. We love to travel. We think about things like money and points and miles and lifestyle stuff a lot. And we always tried to figure out like what is the best way to do this and to be most efficient, optimize that happiness factor while also spending as little as possible. And I think what really started to become apparent over time was a lot of our friends would call us and tap us saying, "Hey, we know you guys could book the ultimate bachelorette party. Can you help us with this?" Or, "Hey, something really interesting happened to me in this other country and we're currently stuck in the legal system. Can you like figure out how to essentially get us out of here?" And so we became kind of like the go-to for anything and everything because of the resourcefulness around the way we've kind of thought about things. And I think as we started digging in further, we realized that if we're doing a lot of this research and we're already thinking about it for ourselves, why not share it more broadly with people who probably have a lot of similar questions? How do I think about cell phones and like all of the different nuances that get used, like the ahas, as far as when you sign up for a new cell phone plan? These are things people don't want to research, but they want the information for. And so that's ultimately what led us to testing our way into releasing all the hacks as a podcast to share just interesting learnings that we have.
I love, okay, I did not know that was your husband. My very first business, I started with my husband. And I left after 15 years. That was really tough. But yeah, so good for you guys. But okay, so what made you decide, you know what? It's time for us to leave the corporate world and go off on our own. So did you start as a side hustle and realize, you know what, there's legs here?
Yes, exactly. So I think there seems to be this recurrent theme with a lot of people I talk to that is if you want to be your own boss, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to go all in. It has to be all or nothing out of the gate. And I think that's a big misconception. It doesn't have to be that way. I think there's a huge opportunity for everyone, particularly women who may want some kind of safety net as far as a reliable income coming in, insurance, whatever it might be, particularly if they have a family and children, to where they can still start investing in creating some kind of like entrepreneurial side business and do that on the side while they have some kind of stable income until they essentially reach their freedom number, which is ultimately what is the number it takes for them to walk away from their stable W2 income in order to go all in on the startup concept that they've been percolating kind of on the side. And so that's exactly what we did. We started it as a side project because we knew we had a lot of interest in doing that and sharing it with the world. We didn't know how it was going to go. And so we weren't about to, especially with two young girls, we weren't about to just walk away from everything we knew from a stability perspective to do that. But I think what we figured out relatively quickly is that within a year and a half, 2 years time, we were able to see that there was enough legs in order to make that transition fully.
Let's talk about that a little bit because what I see a lot, and I've been getting a lot of clients who come to me who are in corporate and they're so burnt out, right? They're either burnt out or they got laid off.
Mhm.
The tech world, everyone's getting laid off. So it's just kind of, what's going on right now. And what I would love the message to be is start your side hustle way beforehand. If you have something that you're interested in, start it before it's even really something where you feel like I need to get out now. Always be nurturing it and see how it builds up. See how you navigate it, what works, what doesn't, and make it kind of a hobby, right? So that you're not caught off guard when all of a sudden there is a sharp turn. Or if you decide, you know what? Things are going well with my side hustle and now I am ready to leave. So I love that you didn't do it out of necessity. It was more out of, you know what? This is working. Let's go jump into this more. What so now let's shift a little bit and talk about the podcast. You have a great podcast. I've seen a number of the guests that you have who are well known. How How did you start? Like, did you already have the people lined up who you wanted to interview? Did you start off really small? I mean, talk to me about how you built up such a popular podcast.
That's a great question. And I think it typically surprises people when they hear how we started. And so I think early on, everyone thought that we had already teed up a variety of different guests. We'd already recorded the interviews and we had them kind of slotted up and ready to go. The reality of it is, we started it very much in a test and learn and kind of like rapid fire um, stance where Chris was actually on someone else's podcast. And so he was recording as a guest. And this guest essentially challenged him to say, hey, if you're thinking about doing this, why don't you just do it? In fact, I have such a big following. I'll slot your podcast. I'll basically pitch your podcast, but you have to get it to me in the next 24 hours. And so
Oh,
very, very quickly, it was like, okay, this is a huge opportunity. And why would we squander something like this? So very quickly came up with a name. We had done 0 recordings. In fact, we essentially pulled together a very quick trailer of what it could be. And we shared it with the podcast host who then released this trailer on his own podcast. And so that's how we started. And that was the first data point that we used to say, people are interested in subscribing. We're seeing subscribers come through. We're seeing interest, good feedback from his listener base. And so now we know there's enough of a there that we really need to scramble and we need to find a few guests that we can interview and record and push live. And so that's what we did. It was very much kind of last minute in the early days. And again, it was our way of testing and learning. And I think one of the things that I took away from how we began was there's a huge importance on the now, not the how. And I think for me, prior to this, I was very focused on how do I do things optimally? How do I do things in the best way, in the strategic way? And I would overthink things over and over in my mind, and I would waste a lot of time rather than just get going. And I think what we've learned now is you've got to start somewhere. And it's not important that you know everything. It's important that you start. Put one foot in front of the other. Start today, and you will start to build this inherent momentum that essentially snowballs over time. And you'll look back and be shocked that you were able to do what you did in such a short time frame. Because through those testing and learnings, you can also course correct. So it's not like you're going 100% in on one specific thing. You're quickly iterating in a very rapid fire manner in a way that allows you to ultimately find that product market fit or the more optimal kind of content in our perspective that we cared about that also resonated very deeply with our audience.
okay. So we're going to address what you just talked about. It sounded like kind of that perfectionism thing that plagues so many of us. right?
Yep.
So I can't tell you how many women I have talked to who they have this great idea and they're definitely capable of it. They have the traits, they have the skills, they're capable of it. But they tell me things like, okay, Midori, this is my idea, but I need to go get this training first. I need to go get this. I need to do these things first. I'm not ready yet. So let's dive into that a bit, Amy. So you had 24 hours. Let's not forget that little tad point that you brought up. You had 24 hours to create this name, and then you got him your trailer. I don't know if it was 24 hours or not, but what have been some of the hiccups that you have experienced as you launched your podcast?
There are a few ones that stand out. I think the first one is uh, as our listener base grew, there were a variety of different personalities and opinions. And so we would get feedback from listeners who oftentimes had very strong perspectives of what we were sharing or wanted to get deeper in one area or didn't like the fact that we had this guest on for whatever reason. And I think one of the biggest challenges initially was trying to make everyone happy or wanting to make listeners happy. And I think what we learned over time was if we are not authentic to ourselves and we are not covering content that we personally really deeply wanted to learn more about and cared about, it would be really hard to maintain a strong listener base and those that would listen to every single episode because they really trusted what we were putting out there. And so I think the first thing was um, staying authentic to who we are and why we are doing what we are. I think a lot of advice that you get, a lot of perspectives you get, oftentimes is kind of garbage. Like everyone has different perspectives, and if it's not aligned with and authentic to who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, particularly in my case, that was a huge kind of challenge that we initially overcame and learned took those learnings away from. I think the second thing that I would say is, particularly when we started out, there was just a lot of really interesting opportunities to go after, and all of them felt very urgent to me. And I felt like if we weren't doing all of it, then we were squandering opportunities and we were going to miss out on these windows of opportunity that we had at that point in time. And trying to and forcing myself to take a step back and realize you can actually do a lot more by doing less. Like slowing down to move fast is critically important because it would allow us to really hone in and focus on the thing that we cared most about at that given point in time or based on what the business needed. And then as we really executed against that, then we could start to broaden our horizon and look at the next big task or initiative or priority. And so, I compare it to like a lion in the jungle a bit, where you never see this fierce mama lion running through the jungle 24/7 trying to find food. That's not sustainable. And so instead, she'll take it nice and easy and she'll wait until her moment and her huge opportunity to strike. And that's when she'll like move very fast into action. And so there needs to be a lot of like the move fast or the move slow to move fast. And I think that's also was a huge challenge for me up front, particularly coming from tech where you move fast every second of every day. Uh, and there is no time to slow down. So it was very kind of contradictory to what I previously knew to be true.
When we first I told you before we hit or maybe we talked about early in this episode, the first business that I started was with my husband, and that business was crazy busy. The phone was constantly ringing. We had two little boys. It was insane. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing. I didn't have a business degree. I went to school for communications and sociology, so didn't know anything. And I remember like I would never have a single extra second, right? I'd show up wherever I need to be, just right on the dot. But that became a habit, that constant chaos. So no, we weren't in tech, but it's still that same kind of that that habit that we get into. We get used to that. And from being in so many other businesses since then, what you talked about, where you observe the opportunity, but then you say, wait, let's make sure this is the right thing. Let's put it, let's really analyze it, move slow to move fast is such a trait that I feel most learn from wounds, right? From bad experience because it's very one of the biggest things I see with entrepreneurs if they are not seasoned is that squirrel thing, right? Where they go after all these different things because they think, "Oh, I'm never going to get that opportunity again," or this is what I should be doing because this is going to launch and they're operating out of fear instead of really operating out of a full vision of where they're going and clarity. How did you how did you realize what you should be focusing on, what you shouldn't? How did you kind of come to that let me refine that question. How did you come to the realization that you needed to slow down to in order to go fast? How did you know what to concentrate on?
The reality of it is in the beginning, I didn't. And I learned through a combination of burnout a little bit, where I was trying to sustain a full-time job, trying to support the podcast, had 2 little girls, at home that I was trying to spend time with, and it wasn't sustainable, and all of the opportunities that were sitting in my mind of what the business could be doing, or the missed opportunity was taking up mind share in a way that I regret having spent that time thinking about. Because then even if I was playing with my girls, I'm always thinking, what should I be doing about the podcast? Am I missing this here? Should I be following up there? Should I be going to this function because it's going to unlock X, whatever it might be. And so I think for me, it was a combination of burnout and there just being greater priorities in life as I've evolved over time, that are competing against the work priorities. And so to be a lot more kind of intentional and thoughtful of not just how I'm spending my physical time, but how am I spending my mental mind share? And if I am doing something, I want to be ultra present. But it came through the tough learnings of regret in spending time with my kids, but not actually being mentally present. And burnout in that I only had so many hours a day. And if I'm not sleeping well, I'm not taking care of my body and moving the way I'd like to every day. I'm not eating right because I'm just so preoccupied with all of these other things. It caught up to me. And that's not I can't help anyone else if I can't help myself. And so that was a really harsh learning.
I think for those of us who are extremely ambitious, so common. It's probably a syndrome. I'm sure there's a name for it, but right? I remember one time my kids were in school and it was a crazy time. I had to go pick up my kid kind of across town. That's where his junior high was. And I was just so busy. I was so stressed out. We had an events business and it was just insane. And then it was the end of the school year. So I was supposed to go meet my girlfriend for a cocktail. And so I did. Had one cocktail and my tongue just swelled up. It was the craziest thing. I ended up on the phone with my other girlfriend later. She's like, "How much did you drink?" And what it was this reaction from all my body chemicals. It was the what is it? That's the it's that chemical of stress and anxiety, and that's how my body reacted. And I realized this is not normal. This has never happened before. And it's time for me really to be intentful, as you mentioned, of what I'm doing and the choices I make, because this is going to get worse.
Completely. I mean, it's good that you listened to that when you did, right? Because
Yeah.
I do think we are conditioned societally to say you can be it all, you can do it all, you can take it all on. And the reality of it is, there's a reason people say it takes a village.
So true.
Asking for help is acceptable. Taking time for yourself is not selfish. But we are not conditioned to think that way. So unwinding yourself from that, especially after an incident like you've experienced, it's it's a new feeling.
It's like it's like that punch in the face, right? You better pay attention. You better
Right.
pay attention or it's gonna get so much worse.
Right.
Okay, so tell me what's next for you? What's next with the podcast? Do you have new ambitions with it? What is your plan?
We do. There's a lot of interesting things that are in the works at the moment. I would say the one that is relatively public at this point, we are launching a curated travel component to our podcast. There are a lot of individuals who listen to our podcast who love travel. We've been to over 65 countries. We've interviewed a variety of different travel experts who are journalists who've written a lot of the guidebooks of these countries. And so to think about how we offer our listeners a truly upscale curated travel experience is really interesting for us. And so our first trip is going to be Iceland this fall. And we'll be releasing seats or available spots for that here in the next month. So be on the lookout for that.
Wait, so you're gonna take guests or individuals to Iceland with you, but it's gonna be part of the podcast.
That's correct. So as an offshoot of the product, or I'm sorry, as an offshoot of the podcast, we will be doing a curated kind of like travel business related to all the hacks. And so we're going to open it up to our membership first. Members are essentially I would say some of our best listeners. They give incredible feedback. They're very involved in our online community. It's a paid membership, and so we'll give them the first opportunities to sign up for this trip, and then if there are any seats left, we'll open it to our broader listener base.
Okay, are you all listening to what she is saying, what Amy is saying? So she and her husband left the tech world, started their own podcast. Now they are building, not just do they have the podcast, that's kind of the thing that ignited your business. You have a paid community, you have an offshoot where you get to travel, write it off, bring your cool members who already are in alignment with you. Are you all listening to what is possible when you get clear on what you want, right? Building it out. And I don't know if you had it all figured out from the beginning. Sounds like you didn't know that you were going to do this travel part, but you just keep going, right? And you just pay attention. So just getting started and figuring it out as you go. So, Amy, I could spend another couple hours with you because we haven't even really dived into your podcast very much, but hopefully we'll have you back if you're open to it where we can talk more about that because I think podcasting is such a great way to build up attention, to meet some really cool people. Like I got to meet you, and open up the door to other opportunities. And so if you are open to it, I'd love to have you back where we can chat more about that. Uh,
Absolutely. Would love
That'd be
that.
great. Thank you so much. So tell us, where can we find out more? What's the URL for the podcast?
Yes, for those interested, go to our website, allthehacks.com. You'll find all of our recent episodes, some of our favorite episodes. You can access our newsletter, which we put out on a weekly basis. It includes long form content as well as latest deals in market. So if you're a deal junkie, check that out, sign up. LinkedIn, I'm Amy Fox, and Instagram, amy.l.fox.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I can't wait to talk to you more about podcasting.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
To be the best, you need to play with the best. You might not have your own personal high-level circle of women yet, but you can hang with us on the Female Millionaire Show. I'm Midori Verity, serial entrepreneur for over 25 years, and I interview badass female founders and cut through to what you really need to know. So in 20 minutes, you have what can take years to learn. If you're wanting to play bigger, come play with us. Join the female entrepreneur revolution today. Cheers.